What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here coming at you with another episode of our Big 12 in 30 days theme. We are joined by Texas Insider for TFB Texas, host of the Fourth and Five podcast, and creator of the subreddit for Longhorn Nation. Will Baizer is here joining us today. So I just want to say I appreciate you joining me today, man.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we got to start with this past season, man. It was a 7-3 season, but the 3 losses were only by a combined 13 points. They were very close games that could have went either way. You know, they capped off their season with a dominant bowl win over Colorado, but did this season exceed, fall short of, or meet your expectations?
It definitely fell short of Texas fans' expectations and mine as well. Every Texas fan coming into this year felt that this was the year to take over the Big 12. You know, you had Oklahoma on a supposed down year. Iowa State was, not as great of a team as they've had been in the past. And the rest of the Big 12 was really down. Oh, Texas came in with a senior quarterback, a senior left tackle, a good, defensive line. The only question you had was a linebacker, and then you felt that with DeMarvion Overshown. So coming into this year, you felt like, wow, this is the year to do it. And to have 3 losses, 1 to TCU, 1 to Oklahoma, your arch rival, in heartbreaking fashion, both of those, and then as well, Iowa State, you couldn't really do that. You couldn't have that in this season. Maybe 2 losses at the most in that season, but other than that, yeah, it was a season that fell short of expectations. That's why you have a coaching change.
Right. And so that gets into my next question. After the season, they move on from Tom Herman. 4 years there, 4 straight bowl wins, a top 10 season in 2018. But in your opinion, what was the true breaking point for Herman in Texas? And do you think it was the right move for the Longhorns?
I think the true breaking point for Tom Herman was probably either this past year in the summer, where all of the social causes, the social uprisings happened, and sort of his response to it versus the response from the athletic department and the donors. Tom Herman's inability to really communicate with the donors, and to he was a very stubborn. That's, I think, was the downfall of Tom Herman, was his stubbornness in general. So I think the downfall really started there and the year before. So coming off that Sugar Bowl, you're expecting something really good, and instead they took a step backwards. So fans were already sort of in a wait and see mode with Tom Herman, and then the summer the boosters fell off, and he kind of bucked the administration with Crystal Conte, and then he didn't back it up on the field. So if he could have backed it up on the field, he would have shut up everybody, but he didn't. His stubbornness in terms of his personnel decisions, his playing style, his calls on the field, even his recruiting calls, all kind of led to his downfall. He didn't really, it feel like he would argue this, but I think the main consensus around Longhorn Nation is that he didn't look in the mirror and change things that other people could see were an issue.
Right. And I mean, I know we covered it on our podcast. I believe the song, for blanking on the name of the song that Texas plays after the games, that was a big publicity scandal. And I read that Herman was very vocal behind the scenes, which did sit well with a lot of the donors. I know they had multiple players come out. I mean, has that kind of died down around campus? And has Steve Sarkisian kind of commented on that same issue?
So the Eyes of Texas issue is the big issue that the Longhorns are facing after the players made some demands. Most of them were met, and a lot of them exceeded. But the one that Texas kind of stood by, and a lot of fans stood by, and is the Eyes of Texas. Now, I feel like the consensus there, unless you're part of the 2 extreme ends of the spectrum, is, if you don't sing it, who cares? If you do sing it, who cares? It's, just deal with it, right? But there are obviously donors there who want the kids to respect it and took the Oklahoma loss and the picture of Sam and really kind of turned the Eyes of Texas argument into the Fire Tom Herman argument. And that's where it kind of started, kind of built up. I feel like the Eyes of Texas was not the issue. It was more of the reason they pushed it, sort of like a way they pushed it. A way they pushed it, what they wanted was their agenda, which was Urban Meyer. So while Steve Sarkisian comes in and he says, yes, we're going to sing the Eyes of Texas because he was told by Crystal Conchi to say that, I don't feel like it's probably still an issue on campus amongst different students, but I feel like it is a very much overblown issue amongst most Longhorn fans. I feel like there's a census on, we like to keep singing the Eyes of Texas. There's obviously sides that's like they need to force the kids to sing and stand. And there's others like we need to get rid of the song. I feel like the main is like, keep it. And if you don't want to sing it, you don't. If you do whatever.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious on what like the tone was surrounding the campus, surrounding the program. But, getting back to more on the field stuff, this marked the last year of Sam Ehlinger. I mean, over 11,000 yards, man, over hundreds of touchdowns. I mean, he's going to go down the Texas record books for everything. What did he mean to the University of Texas? And just for you, where does he rank in Texas quarterback history?
So that's a really tough question because Sam Ehlinger's legacy is one where he basically lived out the dream of every kid who's ever grown up rooting for the Texas Longhorns and in Austin, right? He grew up, wearing Texas burnt orange. He grew up going to the games with his father. And, basically, if he was a quarterback for any different school, Oklahoma or Iowa State, if he grew up, living in Des Moines and going, wearing the red and yellow and going to Iowa State games and then going and becoming the quarterback at Iowa State, everybody at Iowa State would love him. Same with Oklahoma, Crimson and Cream. They love him. He grew up in Norman. Like he was the guy who is basically, what every kid who is a fan of any program wants to be. They want to be the starting quarterback for their university and kind of bring them back to relevance. He did kind of do that. With the Sugar Bowl and everything. But at the end of it, and I really think that this is probably one of the reasons that Tom Herman was let go is, not getting into the Big 12 championship, not ending off on a high note hurt his legacy at Texas. You can't say, he's up there with Colt McCoy and, Tom, Vince Young or James Street. There's one other guy I'm missing right now, number 22. Cannot remember his name for the life of me. But you can't put him up there because, he didn't have all the accolades. He wasn't an All-American. He didn't get you a Big 12 championship. He didn't get you really any championship other than the Sugar Bowl. And it's really tough to say that because I like Sam Ehlinger. I like the kid. He was a great representative for the university. You never heard any scandals about him. There was no like, oh, he's an asshole off the field. He's a bad kid. He got his business degree. He's a smart guy. He's everything that you want as your quarterback. And the fact that he wasn't able to, really prove it with a, even trying for a conference championship in his last year, it hurts because I wouldn't put it on him. I would put it on the system that he was thrown into in his last 2 years, as well as some decisions from the coaching staff. Right. So it's a cloudy, legacy. People will like him fondly for nostalgic reasons, for, the heart reasons, but in terms of the brain reasons, he's probably not up there with the best of the best.
Right. That's what I figured it would go there. It's just, man, all the statistical records and like you said, accolades are there, but it's just like, man, you couldn't get over that hump. You look at it, it's like, man, there's so much left on the table. But due to the exit of Ellinger, there needs to be a new quarterback one. And based on everything I've kind of seen, there's really only two options: Casey Thompson, Hudson Card. Both bring unique skill sets to this Longhorns offense. In your opinion, who is in the driver's seat here, and what do you expect from each of these guys in 2021?
That's the question, isn't it? Who's in the driver's seat in this quarterback race? I don't know if I can really give you a straight answer because I don't think even the team knows. We're too early in right now in the spring ball to really know. I think Casey Thompson has to be, probably a favorite right now because of his experience in the game, his performances when he does get thrown into games, or obviously the Colorado performance. But at the same time, it's a new staff and a completely new, just wiping the slate clean, right? Tabula rasa here when it comes to who's the better quarterback. It's, Hudson Card has shown to have a lot more potential when it comes to being a quarterback. He throws amazing balls. He has a lot of athleticism, but the problem is he's young. That's it. So really, Casey Thompson, the issue with him is he's not a great practice player. He doesn't really he doesn't blow your mind in practice, but when he gets on the field, the switch flips. When he gets in the scrimmages, of switch flips, and he turns into a completely different player, which makes evaluating him in practice extremely difficult for our coach, right? Because you don't know if that's really, who you really got on the field. Should you go with the freshman who can prove it in practice or the guy who, a switch flips in the game? And can he sustain that against better competition? Right. He did it against Colorado. Great. Can you do it against Oklahoma? Can you do it against Alabama, who's coming up in not this year, but the next? Can you do it against Arkansas and ULA, right? Iowa State, all these different teams, right? So it's a huge question. I don't have an answer for you. I don't think anybody has an answer for you. Anybody who says they have an answer for you is lying.
Man, that's what makes spring practice so amazing. Is just, depending on who you talk to, you get different things. And they have a kid coming in next year who could very well start too, in Malik Murphy, who's also an outstanding recruit that they just had commit about a month or two ago. But Steve Sarkisian, man, that is the new face of Texas football. Hired from Alabama, had 2 stints at Washington and USC, fairly successful at times, but what was your initial reaction to the hire, and what do you think is the biggest thing that he needs to do to have success in Austin?
My initial reaction to the hire was, really? Steve Sarkisian? Okay, fine. But I think so far I've sort of started to buy into what Steve Sarkisian is selling, and more so what the athletic department is selling, which is Steve Sarkisian really taking over the offense and him having a lot of help around him. I don't know if you've seen the assistant coaches surrounding him, but it is quite the number of accolades there. You have Pete Kwiatkowski, who they took from Washington, who was maybe the second best defensive coordinator behind Brett Venables in the nation, coming out of Washington. I saw him when we were doing this whole thing where we're looking for who could be the assistant coaches. You look at Pete Kwiatkowski, you're like, this never happened. He's been there forever. And there's no way Texas could even pull him away. And then the football brainiacs, our guy Super K, hears, well, maybe it's a done deal. How the hell did they pull Pete Kwiatkowski from Washington? That's insane. And your inside linebacker coach was Montana State's head coach. You pulled a D1 AA head coach to be your linebackers coach. And then you got Bo Davis on the defensive line, and he has so many accolades and so many players. He's already been at Texas, succeeded. Last time he was there was in 2008 and 2009, that sort of season where, Texas was really good around the defensive line, as well as, your safety and your corners. That was probably the biggest question mark with Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon, but Blake Gideon has shown to be doing pretty well right now. And Terry Joseph brought in the Notre Dame style defense to marry with Pete Kwiatkowski. That's what Steve Sarkisian wanted to do. And then on the offensive side, Steve Sarkisian is your offensive coordinator. I mean, you see what he did at Alabama. We'll see what he can do at Texas right now, because obviously Texas doesn't have the athletes and the depth of athletes that Alabama does. So we'll see, how much of it was Steve Sarkisian, how much of it was Alabama, right? But beyond that, AJ Milwee has been actually a pretty good offensive mind. There was a reason that Steve Sarkisian brought him over. When you see what he did at Akron, he's one of those things where he's one of those candidates or I guess hires that you look at and you're like, who's this guy? And then you look at what he's done and the offensive ingenuity he's brought, and you're okay, I understand it. Wide receiver Andre Coleman, another question mark, but it seems to be working because the guy has proven himself at Kansas State, the Tyler Lockett, and taking guys who, 3 stars and turning them into NFL draft picks. So it was an emphasis on development there, right? He's actually starting to prove pretty good as a recruiter as well. You have the tight end position. You dropped $1 million plus on your tight end. Why can I not remember his name off the top of my head? I should know this. He has a monkey. He's dating a dancer. I might not remember his name. Jeff Banks. Obviously, brain fart moment right there. But Jeff Banks, he is an incredible special teams coach, an incredible recruiter, and an incredible tight ends coach. He is a star as a tight end coach. He's a star assistant coach. It's amazing that they were able to pull him from Alabama and hold on to him. We've heard that he was going to be the coach, and then everybody was excited. Then Alabama said, no, we're going to keep him. And then somehow they are able to pull him away. So it was another celebration. And then you have Kyle Flood, who has just proven again and again to be a great developer of offensive linemen. You have a stacked staff surrounding Steve Sarkisian. So Steve Sarkisian has a high ceiling, a low floor. He's an alcoholic, and you're always an alcoholic, whether or not, how much you change. It's like how I have ADHD. I'm going to have ADHD forever. It's not something I can change. It sucks. It's something that I have to live with and I have to control. Something he's going to have to live with and control. All alcoholics and all people who have depression or ADHD or, really any mental illness they have to deal with. So if he can keep that under control while he's at Texas and not let it get destructive, then, kudos there. But there's also, how is he as a game caller, as a game, dealing in the head coaching position? There's all those other factors as well. So I'll be interested to see how he does. I think the hire right now, at first it was like, it's a B-, but then I think with all the surrounding pieces, A-, B+ sort of hire. So maybe even going into A, just because of the star-studded assistant coaches that he is around him. It's something different than what you had with Tom Herman or Charlie Strong, who just brought in their G5 staffs along with them. This one, they went out and got the best of the best, cherry-picked coaches.
Right. And I'm interested to see how he does against Alabama, in the upcoming seasons. I mean, no assistant coach has ever beaten Saban. That is the craziest stat of all time. So that's and
I'm not expecting him to change it either.
Oh man, we'll see. But I mean, look at National Signing Day, man. It wrapped up a few months ago for the 2021 cycle. Top 20 class in the country, 5-star Jatavian Sanders headlined the class. What were the biggest positional needs for the Longhorns, and who do you expect to contribute immediately?
So one of the biggest positions of need in that class was your jack position, your linebacker who is more of a stand-up rusher or a guy who takes over the flats. Jatavian Sanders fits to that, but he wants to be an offensive player. So we'll see. And even then, he probably plays the weak side backer so that he's more of a pass rush and doesn't have to deal with the run. So they didn't really get a great fit there. You probably also wanted a lot more offensive linemen. It was an offensive lineman heavy class in Texas, and they missed on basically everybody except for Hayden Connor. Now, Hayden Connor, I've been a fan of since, he was an 8th grader. That kid has been huge. Him and Bryce Foster, who went to A&M, both big kids. I heard about coming into Katie Taylor when they were in 8th grade. The coaches were saying, like, yeah, look at this kid. He's an 8th grader. What? Who is that? So, yeah, he was a guy who I'm excited about. But besides that, they really missed on the offensive line. And it's probably because, coaching changes and Texas didn't do as well as they did. And there was a lot of controversy and bad news. It's really, really, really easy to negatively recruit Texas. It's almost too easy. I could do it. It's that easy. I mean, like, who can't? So it makes it really difficult for a coach who's coming in January to, when the recruiting class is signed in December, to hold on to those guys. And even then, it made it impossible for Tom Herman to have any chance at guys like Bryce Foster or, Donovan Jackson, who went to Iowa State. Any of those guys, it kind of out of the question at that point. I mean, Texas had a lot of really, really good momentum in the summer, but it just faded away. So you need offensive line. You kind of missed there. And then you needed probably a standout wide receiver, and they had a shot at a few and missed out there as well. Maybe your quarterback as well, which they had Jalen Milroe, and then you hired a new offensive coordinator. He wanted guys who were more pass happy than they are run happy. Got rid of Jalen Milroe, couldn't find another quarterback. So it was it was a top 20 class, but it wasn't what you needed at Texas. It was a transition year class. They did do very well with their defensive line. The guys up front, the big uglies. So they did well there. They did really well at linebacker. They did need linebacker bodies. That was another need, and they really, really knocked out of the park there, which I think was to the credit of Chris Ash, who is going to succeed wherever he goes as a defensive coordinator, because that guy knows how to coach. And they did well in the transfer market when it came to getting your outside linebackers and a cornerback. Darian Dunn is a guy who shut down Tylan Wallace when he played Oklahoma State at McNeese State. So I think Texas is very good in a few different positions, but they lack bodies now at Jack. They lack elite talent at wide receiver. And they have good top end talent at offensive line, but beyond that, the depth is, it's questionable. You have a bunch of new guys in there and not a bunch of guys who are like 5 stars. You have Tyler Johnson, but that's about it.
Right. I think wide receiver was an issue last year too. I mean, I think Pro Football Focus had Texas rated like in the bottom 5 of the entire country in wide receiving talent coming in. And it also doesn't help that Alabama came knocking on Texas's doorstep this recruiting cycle. I mean, they got the Brockermeyer twins. They got JoJo Earl. Yeah, they got, like you said, Jalen Milroe. I mean, they dominated Texas, and so that's got to be tough. Hopefully Sark can turn that around, but I want to look ahead to 2021, man. I ain't gonna lie, this schedule's tough. I mean, even the non-conference. If you don't know football, then yeah, you look at Louisiana Lafayette and Arkansas, and you say, no need to worry there. But if you know football, those two teams were very well. Arkansas was very improved last year. Louisiana Lafayette was a problem for a lot of teams. Then you have road trips: TCU, Iowa State, West Virginia, all 3 tough places to play. TCU's had Texas's number for a few years now. What for you though is the ceiling and or floor for the 2021 Longhorns team?
The floor or the ceiling for Texas, I feel like, is 2 losses. I feel like there are 2 losses in that schedule. You could pick any number of teams there. You have Iowa State is going to be good again. You have TCU is actually going to be good with Max Duggan and Quentin Johnston. Oklahoma is going to be good with Spencer Rattler and another year of that offense, basically everybody returning and running back talent, being infused with running back talent. I'm not too afraid of West Virginia, though they are a good team. Kansas State with Skylar Thompson. Yeah. Skylar Thompson coming in is going to be actually a decent team to face. And then obviously, yeah, you talked about it. Arkansas was on the up last year with their coach Infusion coming in. So they're going to be difficult to face. And then Billy Napier at Louisiana has turned that into a G5 powerhouse. It's a really, really tough schedule. So I think the floor obviously is probably around 4 losses to Texas for Texas. You could drop any combination of Louisiana, Arkansas, TCU, Oklahoma, Iowa State, and even Kansas State. But I think the ceiling there again is probably a 10-win season. I don't see them going out and winning 11 this year. I could potentially see 10 if things break their way, if they get the right quarterback, if the offensive line holds steady. They have, while I said they don't have a lot of talent, like high-end talent, they do have a lot of depth and a lot of guys who are promising at that position, especially with Derek Kerstetter coming back off of a broken ankle, which went backwards. You have a really good defense and a very veteran-heavy defense in Texas. So I think you have a shot to win 10, but if things just fall apart, I could definitely see Texas having 4 losses.
Right. I mean, and just, in terms of kind of a follow-up there, how long of the saying is like, how long of a leash does Steve Sarkisian have? I mean, how flexible are the fans, the upper management, the donors going to be with Steve Sarkisian these first few years?
Flexibility is not known at Texas. Fans want to win, and they want to win now, especially after he promised that this is not going to be a multi-year thing. He kind of came in and said, we're going to win right away. And I think he should have given himself some time, because I don't think Texas is a job right now that's like, oh, yeah, we're going to come in and win 11 games immediately. You still have to secure your state. You're coming off a meh recruiting class for Texas standards. Now for every other, if it was Iowa State and you got a 5-star, like Jadavian saying, oh my God, it's the best thing in the world. But Texas, when you're facing, Oklahoma, who just raided your state, and you're going to face Alabama in a few years, 2 years back to back, it's going to be really, really tough. You need all the 5-stars you can get. You need a recruiting class like what Texas is looking at in 2022. But flexibility, man. If he wins 8-9 games, maybe they'll give him another year to be like, hey, do better. And they kind of want to see a steady progression like this. If you do anything that goes down, then you're going to be in some trouble, Steve Sarkisian. But that's part of the job at Texas. That's part of the job description. So, yeah, it's a lot to deal with as a Texas head coach. You have a lot on your shoulders. You have a lot of people to please. And with the amount of Texas, graduates there are, and the prosperousness of this state, I don't know if that's a word, how there's a lot of rich people. There's a lot of rich Texas graduates, and a lot of them, take a subset of that and they think they're the most important thing. Take a smaller subset and they're also huge Texas donors. So, they kind of drive, but that's still a huge subset. And you have Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and Fort Worth, I guess, on top of that. And then you have the out-of-state guys too. So there's a lot of people you have to please, and meaning that you have to really be on your guard as a Texas fan. Like, that's the reason that you always hear, oh, Texas donors are, taking control of Texas, because there are tons of Texas donors. There's not one Boone Pickens, right? There's not one guy who you have to deal with, right? I mean, Alabama had the same problem for a while, but at the same time, they once you have success, and once you have as much success as Nick Saban, you can tell the donors to shove it, right? You can't, Tom Herman tried to do that, but he didn't have enough leverage to do so. He got the boot.
Right. I mean, and I'm assuming, just as an outsider, the success that Texas A&M is having is not helping anyone's case who's a Texas fan. They see what Jimbo Fisher's doing. TCU is on the upswing. I mean, SMU's even doing good in like the group of 5. So the whole overall football in Texas is increasing. But, man, I appreciate you coming on here, dropping all this Texas knowledge. This has been one of my favorite things to do, is get all these people from all these schools to kind of give us the inside rumblings. But where can our listeners find you, man? I know you got a podcast, got a Reddit stream, all that, man. So where can they find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter at WILLBAIZER. My name, Will Baizer. You guys can also listen to my podcast on the Hornscast channel. So type into any podcasting platform out there, the Hornscast, HORNS cast, CAST, or follow us on Twitter at the Hornscast or 4th and 5, Pretend We're Football, any one of those. Or you can find us on Reddit at Longhorn Nation, our Longhorn Nation, or you can find our writing, my writing, and the site I work for, thefootballbrainiacs.com, Texas.thefootballbrainiac, thefootballbrainiac, sorry, just hit puberty.com. So that's where you guys can find my stuff.
Awesome, man. But yeah, guys, make sure to go check out Will. We'll definitely have to have him back on as we get closer to the season, man. Hopefully Texas can turn it back around, man. And I hope Steve Sarkisian has an awesome season. But guys, y'all know where to find us. We have Kansas next up in our Big 12 in 30 days. Y'all know y'all can find the 2-minute drill Monday through Friday on our YouTube channel. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to have as much to talk about with Kansas as we do Texas right now. But, man, I appreciate it.
There's a lot of controversy.
That is true. That is true. It's a play-by-play, guy. So I just don't know how deep we can get into all the controversy. So we'll see. But guys, y'all make sure to go check out Iowa State, Oklahoma, K-State. We've already covered all those schools. But for myself, for Will, and the Blue Bloods, guys, we are out.